All right, we're joined by Senator Tester, spending some time here in Billings today. A couple of things we want to talk to you about today. First of all, have you had a chance to look at the proposed budget from President Trump?
Yeah, I did. And look, it's in need of some repair. It impacts agriculture, production agriculture, pretty negatively because it cuts the crop insurance program. It impacts conservation programs because it cuts an incredibly important program for conservation called Land and Water Conservation Fund. Cuts it from 475 million down to about 14 million. Does some cutting on Medicare and Medicaid. It's overall, and look, we're in the beginning phases, so we've got some time. But what makes this budget particularly difficult is right out of the chute, it creates another $1 trillion to our debt. And so as we look to fund those programs that are pretty important, like crop insurance and others, we've got to figure out where that money is going to come from, because the debt is, in good times, when we're adding money to the debt, that's very difficult. We had the economic slowdown back in 2007 and 2008. The safety net programs have to be ramped up to get your economy back going. Now we're adding debt, and we've got an economy that's probably going as good as it's ever gone in the history of the country. So we've got our challenges when it comes to this budget, because food security is important, making sure that we deal with our public lands. It's $7 billion a year to the economy of the state of Montana is very important, and that's where the Land and Water Conservation Fund comes in at. So we've got a lot of work to do as we go down the line. Housing is another issue that gets cut. Food stamps, SNAP program gets cut. It's you know, folks out there that are in need of food, you don't want to be turning your back on them. I mean, the truth is that employment is nearly full, and was pointed out to me today as I visited with some folks. The folks that aren't working probably aren't working because they can't work, whether they're physically able or not.
I know you also have expressed some concern about pre-existing conditions, and the President had said in the State of the Union that he would guarantee those. And well, what are your thoughts about after seeing the budget?
Well, I mean, the budget actually supports the lawsuit that's to take away pre-existing conditions from people. And so on one hand, he's saying, I'm going to guarantee them. On the other hand, he's funneling money in to get pre-existing conditions overturned. So it's a difficult situation. And look, healthcare is the #1 issue in this state, probably the #1 issue in the country. And making sure that our small hospitals are able to stay open, making sure that our big hospitals are able to stay open, making sure that we have doctors and nurses that take care of people when they get sick is really, really, really important. And I think if we start doing things like taking away pre-existing conditions, it just puts people in a world of hurt that, you know, I used to know the statistics, but a good number of people have high blood pressure or some kind of pre-existing condition out there that would prevent insurance companies from having to cover them in times of sickness. I
know, as you mentioned, it's still very early in the stages with this proposal, but anything in there that stood out as being this is really a good thing?
Well, I mean, look, the border, I mean, look, I want a secure border. I mean, I think that's really, really important. I think how the money is spent, I think we could spend it better, particularly on technology, which could be done for pennies on the dollar versus building a metal wall, which has its downside. And some of it blew over here a while back, and you've got challenges of it just being secure. I think when you have technology and the kind of artificial intelligence that goes along with the technology, you can see people coming for miles, and you can get folks to those points where they're at much quicker. But we are where we are when it comes to the wall, and that's where it is. But there's some good things in the budget. I think the support for the military is important. We've been at war for 20 years now. It's time we rebuild it, and that started some time ago. But once again, the President's proposing pulling money out of that military budget to go towards the wall on the southern border. That's going to have negative impacts on our military, particularly our C-130s. So we're going to be working through the appropriations process when we go back. That'll be job one moving forward, to make sure that we get a budget that'll work for America, work for small businesses, work for family farmers, and work for working families.
I haven't had a chance to talk to you since the impeachment trial. I think everyone kind of knew going into that what the outcome was going to be. What was that like, knowing that, sitting there, and what were your thoughts about how it ended?
Well, look, I advocated strongly for more evidence and more people to testify. I think this was the first Senate impeachment trial in history where there was no new evidence presented and no new folks witnesses coming forward to testify. I think that's unfortunate. I think we had the time to do that. All we had to do was do it. I think in some senses of the word, the cake was baked before we stepped in the Senate chamber, and I think that's unfortunate. We all took an oath of office to uphold the Constitution and be unfair and unbiased. I'm not sure that was done by everybody.
Has that made it difficult to work with any of your colleagues on the other side of the aisle? What's it like right now?
It's an interesting question, Russ. No, I mean, look, you got to compartmentalize stuff. People did what they did for reasons that they justify in their own mind, and there's too many big issues that we need to focus on to let this derail the situation. Most all good legislation is done in a bipartisan way. So if I've got legislation, I need Republican help, and if Republicans have legislation, they need help from people like me, and we're going to continue to roll our sleeves up and get things done.
I know as a senator, you've got a lot on your plate and have to do a lot of multitasking, but on your to-do list, what's probably tops on it?
After we get through the appropriations process, that's number one. Then I think we still have to do oversight of the VA. We passed a lot of really important bills, the Mission Act, the 21st Century GI Bill, a bunch of bills over the last 2 years. We've got to make sure that they're implemented correctly and we're not wasting taxpayer dollars, and that the veterans are getting the health care and the services that they have earned. And then I think the third thing, if I was going to put it into 3 buckets, is housing. As I go around the state of Montana, and I don't think Montana is different than any other state, housing, affordable housing in particular, is critically important. We've got to figure out how we can get more affordable housing out there so the economies can expand, so businesses can expand, so the cities want to recruit new businesses into their town. They got a place for the people to live. Those are probably the 3 things I'm going to focus on most.
Okay. And I know with the Veterans Affairs Committee, you've been working on some issues with mental health.
Yes, we have. Look, a bill called the John Scott Hannon Healthcare Bill is going to deal with mental health, kind of outside the box kind of methods. Some dealing with rural, remote areas where folks can go into pods and see a psychiatrist in a more urban area to be able to get to their, address the challenges that they have, all in privacy, so folks, they don't know if they're going in the pod to get their blood pressure checked or to talk to somebody online that could help them with some mental health issue they might have. That's part of this bill. Dealing with alternative healthcare, mental health services like yoga, equine therapy, those kind of things are part of this bill. And then just getting more docs into the system is in this bill. This bill is named after John Scott Hannon, who's a Navy SEAL from Montana. Came back home after several decades serving in the service, and was very upfront about the mental health needs that he needed, and was getting help, worked with the mental health folks around the state, NAMI and others. He ended up taking his life a year or so ago, and so we thought it was important to name this bill after him. His family is very supportive, and it's just one of those bad things that happens all too often when a military man comes home or a woman comes home and doesn't have the services they need and can't cope with the difficulties that have been created because of their service in the military.
And you were here in Billings today for the renaming of 2 of the VA clinics after 2 great Montanans. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, Ben Steele and Joe Medicine Crow, 2 real heroes that Montanans know, and a fair amount of the country knows too. Ben Steele, who survived the Bataan Death March, who was in captivity as a prisoner of war for over 1,200 days, 1,240 some days actually. Incredible man. It gave so much back to his community when he came back for the service, and lived to the age of 98, just died I think in 2016. And then Joe Medicine Crow, Dr. Medicine Crow, was a guy who was the last warrior chief of the Crow tribe. Went out and stole 50 Nazi horses during World War II, and did a number of things that were exemplary of a warrior, and just an incredible guy. Lived into his hundreds and also died just a few years ago. But both these people are fine examples of what the military does to folks, builds them, and they've given so much to their community and given so much to this country. These clinics are going to be doing the same thing, helping out veterans. And so now we've got 2 fine clinics named after 2 fine men.
Before we let you go, anything else that you feel like is important to mention?
No, it's good. It's
Okay.
good, Russ.
All right.
Thank you
Thank you,
very
sir.
much.